Well, look, we've already been talking about VONGA. We didn't make it up. Trefor Davies is here as our guest on the Techie Spot tonight. Trefor Davies runs the business ISP in Newark, Timico. Also sits on the board of the ISP associations, so you know what's going on in terms of internet service providers. We've been talking about the connectivity to properties. Now that is highlighted even more in an area like Lincolnshire when you start to get out into the rural parts of Lincolnshire, isn't it? It's a big issue. It's a huge and hugely emotive issue. I mean, I quite often listen to Radio Lincolnshire on the internet. Okay, that's why I do it. It's probably better quality over the internet than it is on the radio sometimes, especially the DAB. But so many people in Lincolnshire, but all over the country, and it doesn't have to be. You don't have to get very far out of town to not have a very good internet connection. So many people can't do it. So many people can't make Skype phone calls because they haven't got the bandwidth there, and all of the investment, like VONGA, for example, that we've just been speaking about, all this fibre investment is going into densely populated areas that already get good internet connection, because that's where all the people are, or the number of people per exchange, which makes it viable to spend the money, right? So what does that do for someone living in a village with only 50 people, or even a village with 500 people isn't really big enough to make it cost effective, right? And there is a groundswell of rural activism happening now, especially following really the disappointment that they think that all these are the new laws that have been passed with the digital economy bill and following on from Digital Britain, where people were hopeful that they might finally do something about it and get rid of what's called the digital divide, which is the unfairness between the rich townies and the poor rural types who can't have the broadband poverty, not other benefits they get from living there. So it doesn't look like it's going anywhere. The government doesn't appear to be doing much, or at least not doing it fast enough. So there are lots of organisations in the UK now who are thinking about ganging together and seeing if they can do something with a collective voice. Well, you had a big meeting, didn't you, at your headquarters in Newark on Friday? That's right. So what sort of organisations are coming forward and want to be part of this? The Country Landowners Association, CLA, that's quite a famous one. We had people like Lincolnshire County Council who have got, there's been a lot of initiatives in Lincolnshire over the last few years trying to get connectivity into rural areas. Lots of small network runners around, Yorkshire. There's big investment going into Cornwall from the EC. So there were people from all over the place, and so they all got together and to discuss how on earth, what they do about it. Okay. One of the things is that the CLA is tomorrow in London launching an initiative to get all these people together into some kind of loose trade association, if you like, to try and put pressure on the government, which is, of course, good timing with the elections coming up, whenever that may be. But another of the issues, which is all part of the putting pressure on the government, is understanding what the problems are. Why is it difficult to roll out broadband to these areas? There's one example. There's a network in Lancashire called the Wennington network. They've got about 20 or 30 users. They've got a 2 megabit connection, which costs them about £20,000 to put in, and they get a rudimentary broadband connection. For them to put a bigger connection in costs £70,000, which for 20 or 30 users, £70,000 a year, that is, right? That's not going to work. But if you look at why it costs so much, and you start drilling into it and looking at things like the rates system, every single metre of fibre along that 20 or 30 miles, or whatever it is, you have to pay rates, right? And I don't know, another quiz question. Have you got any idea how much the rates? I've no idea. It's £600 per kilometre. Yeah. So if you've got a community of 50 people or 10 people, and you've got to run a 10-kilometre fibre or a 20-kilometre fibre, that is not economic. So one of the things the government could do would be to just get rid of the rates, which would make it fair, right? Which would make it potentially more viable. The other thing that they have to do is the way the rating system has been set up, and remembering it's been around for 400 years now, okay, is that
it's based on a volume play. So someone like BT, who has got the 12 million kilometres or thereabouts, allegedly, fibre, they pay £600 a metre for the first one, but then it'll be less for the second one and less for the third, and so on, till it gets to the point where for them to roll out extra fibre, it really doesn't cost them that much. But for somebody new coming into the game, wanting to sell fibre to these rural areas, they're all in it for the £600 a metre, right? So it makes it difficult for people to come up with new initiatives, for communities to get together to do things that will enable them.
And that tends to be what's been happening. And we've had this here in Lincolnshire as well. You do get communities having to do something to get anywhere near the connection speed that they want.
And it's worse than that, because I went to a meeting last week at the Government Valuation Office Agency, which is where they come up with how much rates you should be paying for these things, and the government wants to apply rates to Wi-Fi hotspots, and they don't know how much to charge for a Wi-Fi hotspot yet. But of course, a lot of these community rural areas depend on wireless connections, and a lot of them are housed in on the top of silage silos of a friendly farmer who doesn't charge them for it but wants to help the community. What the government wants to do is charge rates on that free service, because there's a perceived rental value. If you wanted to rent it out to somebody on the free market to a mobile phone mast, maybe there's a value associated with it.
And so the idea all these groups are getting together to put pressure on any party, because this has been around for so long, to just look at this.
And one of the propositions
look at this again.
Is that there's a very high-profile 50p a phone line tax that is going to be charged to everybody with a phone line. That includes your granny who doesn't have any interest in going on a broadband. But of course, there are some people who think that's not fair, all right? Whereas if you were to remove that and remove the rates as an alternative way of subsidising it, that actually is fair, all right?
Good. Well,
it's complicated.
That's solved then. We can all move forward. So if you removed all that, the actual cost of connecting everybody up wouldn't actually be...
Well, if you think about it, right? When you've dug up you paid to dig up the ground in the first place, you put the fibre in, it stays there, nothing ever happens to it, except maybe once in a blue moon when the tractor goes through it and you have to send someone out to fix it. So the only cost is associated with the equipment at both ends, and then that cost is the electricity cost and maybe the depreciation on that equipment, right? So the rates adds an annual cost, which is a huge proportion of the cost of running the network, over and above any other costs. Deathly hush there.
There you go.
So they all sink in.
That's interesting. But, are they actually going to remove that?
Oh, well.
Because the thing is that...
Let's see where this CLA initiative gets us.
Because it's quite a new thing. People haven't... lots of these groups that we've been talking about haven't been paying out that money. So in one way, they wouldn't be losing that money because they're not getting it in at the moment, because it's stopping people doing it.
No, exactly.
It's interesting stuff. Treff, thank you very much. Thanks for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
Expanding our mind with the world of technology. Treff Davies from the business ISP Timico, which is based in Newark. And next week, more techie stuff. Monday evenings, we talk about techie stuff. If you've just come through halfway through that, if you want to listen again, if your connection is any good, you can grab it on the BBC iPlayer and listen to Drive Time.
On air and online.
This is BBC Lincolnshire.
On air and online.
This is BBC Lincolnshire.